Hi there, I'm Steve Best, Howe Sound Site Steward for the SKABC Association of BC. For those who haven't seen my previous presentations on the Sea to Sky Marine Trail, I'll be giving a very quick overview of the trail itself. But really, the focus will be on the work that SKABC has done since it took over the care of the recreation sites on the trail. The presentation will be in two parts. The first part will feature all the work SKABC had done from the creation of the trail up to the end of 2019. The second part will feature all the work that has been done in Howe Sound this year, the year of COVID-19. While all other club activities ground to a halt, work in Howe Sound has been going ahead faster than ever. Welcome to this update on the Sea to Sky Marine Trail. Work on the trail started in 2010, and the Sea to Sky Marine Trail had its grand opening on June 14th, 2015. The Marine Trail is made up of 7 launch sites, campsites at 4 pre-existing parks, and campsites at 6 new recreation sites on Gambier Island and the west side of Howe Sound. The new recreation sites are Ramillies Channel on Gambier Island, Bain Creek on the west side of Howe Sound, Thornborough Channel, Islet View, Zorro Bay, and Tantalus Landing. When the trail opened, the initial work at the sites included site signs, boat runs, and tent pads and trail work. Along with Mick Allen, Nick Heath, our fearless treasurer, has been very much involved with the Sea to Sky Marine Trail from the beginning. In March of 2017, SKABC entered into a partnership agreement with Recreation Sites and Trails BC to look after the recreation sites on the trail. At about the same time, I retired, and in the summer of 2017, I moved to Squamish. In the fall of 2017, Nefarious Nick recruited me as SKABC's first Howe Sound site steward. I may have the title, but it has very much been first a mentorship by, and now a partnership with, Nick. Almost immediately after recruiting me, Nick said, "Oh, by the way, your first annual report is due. Watch out for Nick. He does stuff like that." Work on the campsites since SKABC took over has included steel food caches, or bear bins, were installed at all of the sites in the summer of 2017. The food caches are worksite toolboxes, painted green with bear-proof hardware added, and transported to the sites. installed typically on concrete sonotube footings. Back in 2015, SKABC had held a paddling film festival to raise money for BC Marine Trails, raising over $2,000. In March of 2018, and again in 2019, SKABC has again put on the festival, now specifically as a fundraiser for the Howe Sound sites, raising over $4,000 in 2018 and over $6,500 in 2019. It just kept getting better and better. Film festivals are on hold these days, but let's hope we can do them again soon. Visitor logbooks were installed at all of the sites in spring of 2018. We are making decisions on what to do at which sites based on the feedback the logbooks are providing, on the use the sites are getting. At Tantalus Landing, this amazing table was built by a team led by Randy Chatterjee in spring of 2018 out of reclaimed wood on an existing concrete base. For the other 5 sites, picnic tables were built out of reclaimed cedar, stained, taken apart, and in August of 2018, they were reassembled on site. Tantalus Landing has a creek with the boat run and food cache on one side and the main camping area on the other, and the creek crossing could be tricky at times. In October of 2018, 2 logs which were found on site were moved into position using a hand-powered chain hoist. The following spring, decking was added, and there is now a nice log bridge across the creek. In the fall of 2018, a club member's house in Vancouver was demolished. Prior to demolition, a team of volunteers salvaged wood from the front porch and rear deck and stored it at another club member's house over the winter. The salvaged wood has since been used in a number of projects. From the beginning, it was clear that our most pressing need and our greatest challenge at these small, well-used sites next to a city was getting toilets at all of the sites. In the spring of 2018, it was decided to proceed with the first toilet at one of the sites, Zorro Bay. Approximately half the funding for this toilet was provided by Recreation Sites and Trails BC, and the remainder came from BC Marine Trails and SKABC. After several delays, including wildfire closures and our contractor fracturing his pelvis in a paragliding accident, the toilet finally went ahead in March of 2019. It's a Toilet Tech urine diverting composting toilet installed by a contractor, and it's pretty nice. A powerful windstorm in February of 2019 scattered debris around the shores of Howe Sound. On April 10th and 11th, SKABC participated in a Howe Sound cleanup with a crew of volunteers camping out at Zorro Bay. 4 boatloads of debris and garbage were removed, mostly from Zorro Bay and Rimilly's Channel. Now that we had a toilet at Zorro, we anticipated more use, so we decided to go ahead in May of 2019 with a prototype of a tent platform using some of our salvaged wood for framing. Over the 2019 May long weekend, an outfitter from Squamish held a SUP touring course at Zorro Bay. In exchange, in August, they paddled over and applied a coat of stain to the decking. Apodaca Park is a little 20-acre provincial park on the southeast side of Bowen Island, adjoining a large ecological reserve. It has a sweet little beach, a creek, and a master plan from 1984 that calls for campsites, but nothing has ever been done. We have been pushing to establish it as a campsite. It's in a crucial location for both the Sailor Sea Marine Trail and the south end of the Sea to Sky Marine Trail. In 2019, we, and by we, I mean both BC Marine Trails and SKABC working together, took a crucial first step, an archaeological impact assessment, now required whenever a park site may have had First Nations use. In July of 2019, we went to the park with BC Park staff and went over a campground layout that had been developed by Mick Allen and Nick Heath, with up to 14 tent platform locations. The reason for tent platforms throughout, as well as an above-ground toilet, like the other ones we are installing in Howe Sound, is to minimize our impact. We then hired an archaeological consultant, and on October 2nd, 2019, we went to Apidaka with 2 archaeologists and a member of the Tsleil-Waututh First Nation. While they did their investigations, we cleared trails to the future tent sites. The consultant has issued a report stating that there are no archaeological concerns at this park. Also in October of 2019, we hired a landing craft type water taxi to deliver material to 2 sites. We dropped off material for a composting toilet at Bain Creek and dropped off material for a second tent platform, this time at Thornborough Channel. The tent platform was planned to be going on the high rock bluff at Thornborough, but that's a project that would have to wait for 2020. Because the rest of 2019 was spent building the second toilet, this time at Bain Creek. The first toilet at Zorro is pretty nice, but it was also pretty expensive and has a complicated mechanism. We decided to try a volunteer-built version of a simpler type of toilet that Nick has come up with, and that we're hoping will be a prototype for toilets at other marine trail sites. It's a 2-chamber composting toilet with urine diversion and uses recycling bins as the chambers. Drawings were done by Mick Allen, and the toilet was built by Nick and a whole host of volunteers over a lot of site visits. The roof is clear polycarbonate to let in lots of light on this shady site. The toilet was mostly complete by the time we shut things down for the winter. A couple of physically distanced trips in the spring, and the toilet was ready to go, and work on steps for the access trail was underway. We will be evaluating the performance of this toilet prototype as it gets used. Over the course of this project, we learned a couple of lessons. 1, that stick building a toilet on site took too long, and things had to be prefabricated. And 2, that these toilets were too big a project to be volunteer built. We were better off having them contractor built, like Zorro Bay, and saving our volunteers for more manageable projects. That brings us to 2020, and a year unlike any other. When COVID-19 hit, it shut down all the other activity in the club, but not Howe Sound. We started the year, before COVID, with a meeting with Recreation Sites and Trails BC, where we floated the idea of an RSTBC capital project to build composting toilets at all 4 remaining sites over a 2-year period. So, we applied for capital project funding, lined up RSTBC's best contractor, the same guy who had built the Zorro Bay toilet, and settled on a design. Nick's Bane Creek toilet was still an unproven prototype, and we needed something tried and true. Early in 2020, Nick traveled to the Sunshine Coast Trail and brought back photos of their toilets. 2-chamber, non-urine diverting, composting toilets based on designs used on the Appalachian Trail. They were simple and, unlike the Toilet Tech toilets, had no moving parts. We took their concept, made what we think are several improvements, and I put together a set of drawings. When the RSTBC capital project funding didn't come through, we decided to go ahead anyway, and to build all 4 toilets in 2020. With $18,000 in grants from Trans-Canada Trail, $2,000 in donations from BC Marine Trails, and the remainder coming from SKABC's legacy funds. By then, COVID had shut most things down, but our toilets were the perfect COVID project. Our contractor and his helper could prefabricate the toilets while self-isolating in his shop in Squamish, and then build them while self-isolating in the wilderness of Howe Sound. By the end of April, the design was ready, and our contractor was given a tour of the sites. The contract for the first toilet at Tantalus Landing was let in mid-May, and our contractor began work. Here's our contractor, Todd Nichols, milling cedar for the cribbing under the toilet in his shop in Squamish. Here, the cribbing is going together before being disassembled for transport. Wall panels being prefabricated in Todd's shop. On May 29th, Todd, his helper Josh, their gear and materials were taken to Tantalus Landing by water taxi from Squamish. For each toilet, Todd planned to camp at each site for 3 days. On the afternoon of day 1, I paddled over to join them. When I arrived, Todd, on the right, and Josh were clearing the toilet site. Meanwhile, Todd had hired a pro climber / certified rope access technician who paddled over that morning in Todd's kayak and had just peeled a large, dangerous granite flake from the top of the cliff just up the hill from the boat run. Back at the toilet site, timber footings were bolted to boulders. The cribbing went up, and the floor went on. I returned to the site on day 3. By the end of day 3, the toilet was almost complete, with just the thrones, the polycarbonate roofing, and the entry steps to do. 2 days later, Todd, Josh, and I kayaked to the site from his shop. While Todd finished the roof and entry steps, Josh and I worked on rock steps to access a new camping area, dubbed the penthouse, where Todd felled a danger tree and cleared a tent site with his chainsaw. Here's Todd paddling home with his kayak laden with tools and a ladder. Here's the first tent at the penthouse. It belongs to Paul and Willa Geddes. They were camped there when I showed up to add to the rock staircase. They gave up their tranquil camping experience to help me, carrying bucket loads of rocks from the boat run to the stair. The thrones were still on back order. When they arrived 2 weeks later, Todd paddled back to the site to install them. And here's the finished product. June 17th, and materials for the Islet View toilet are being loaded on Todd's trailer as he builds them. June 22nd, and the water taxi is being loaded at Horseshoe Bay. I had a meeting on day 1, so I paddled over on day 2. As I arrived, the first wall panel had just been put up.
Okay.
The second panel being lifted into place.
Yeah, I got it here. Good. You gonna hit that? Yeah. Hey, stand her up.
Bolting on a side wall panel. And bolting on the front wall. By the time they were framing the roof, it had begun to rain. Putting on the roof plywood at the end of the day. I returned on day 3 as they were installing the metal roof in the rain. Installing the polycarbonate, the finished toilet. After the toilet was finished, Todd used his chainsaw skills to cut openings through massive logs as he and Josh pushed a trail through to open up a camping area on the plateau behind Todd in this shot. In all the rain that Todd and Josh were working in, the trail up to the toilet became quite slippery and treacherous. On July 21st, Philip Kubik, Nick Heath, and I kayaked over to Islet View to build steps on the trail and to level 2 tent pads on the new plateau. I believe this is just the second kayak-based work party on the Sea to Sky Marine Trail, the first being Randy Chatterjee's Tantalus Table Building Extravaganza. But I would like to see more of them whenever it's feasible. On August 6th and 7th, Nick Heath, Brian Pegg, and Philip Kubik camped out at Thornborough, lugged all the materials that had been dropped off the previous fall up to the high rock bluffs, and built the frame for a tent platform. As anyone who has been to the site will appreciate, just carrying the materials from sea level to the bluffs is a major feat. Brian used his rock climbing skills to hand drill holes in the granite to bolt the frame to the rock. A month and a half later, Nick and I returned to Thornborough to screw down the decking and to stain everything. This is the second tent platform the club has built. If we want to add more tent capacity at our sites in the future, it will likely require more tent platforms. After Islet View, Todd left town to work on a couple of BC Parks contracts. He got back to Squamish September 21st and started work on the Ramillies Channel toilet the next day. On September 28th, they loaded the materials on a water taxi at Horseshoe Bay and unloaded it on the beach at Ramillies Channel. Meanwhile, I shuttled Todd's truck and trailer to Porto Cove and paddled over to join them. When I arrived, they had set up camp, carried everything up to the toilet site, and started on the foundation. Here's the cribbing on day 2 in a photo by Todd. I returned on day 3 to find the toilet nearly complete and trail work underway. Todd had added a third man to his crew, and that's Luke, Josh's younger brother. The steep section of the trail had a couple of springs coming down it, and Todd did a great job on the steps, using free-draining gravel held in place by driftwood risers that allows the water to drain through underneath. The finished toilet. The crew on the beach waiting for pickup, and the water taxi picking them up as I paddled away. On day 2, Nick and I were off doing other stuff. Here, we're cutting drift logs that were clogging the boat run at Tantalus Landing. On our way back at high tide, we would be able to tow away this large log. Then it was on to Zorro Bay, where we put up signage, and built a guardrail around the high end of the tent platform. On October 6th, Todd delivered the materials for the Thornborough Channel composting toilet to Horseshoe Bay and loaded it on a water taxi. I had a meeting, so this time it was Nick who shuttled Todd's truck to Porto. On day 2, I paddled over and joined them at Thornborough. When I got there, I was amazed by the progress they had already made on this difficult site. Todd was already framing the roof. Here's the metal roofing going on. And here are photos of the finished toilet that Todd sent me on day 3. They got out of there at the end of the day in the nick of time, just before the weather turned really nasty. While I was on site with Todd on day 2, we planned out a log bridge over the creek and selected a cedar log from the beach. Before he left the site on day 3, Todd chainsawed it in half lengthwise, and he and his crew carried the halves over to the creek and started a trail on the other side. So, on October 24th, we returned to Thornborough. It took 2 trips in Nick's little 16-foot skiff to take Todd, his new helper Matt, their tools, bridge materials, and me from Porto to Thornborough. When Nick and I arrived with the second load, Todd and Matt had almost finished filling a wire gabion with rocks to support one end of the bridge. At the other end, they bolted a 6x6 cedar timber to the rock on the other side as a support for the log stringers. Cross bracing went in, and cedar decking was installed. Todd had decided to replace his funky cedar log toilet entry steps with dimensional stringers and treads. So, while they were working on the bridge, Nick and I installed the entry steps. Here is Todd chainsawing another cedar log in half lengthwise for a second, smaller bridge over a small intermittent channel. There's the second bridge and the finished main bridge. While Todd, Nick, and I were doing danger tree assessments, Matt finished the trail on the other side of the creek. In conclusion, I'm really happy with the work we accomplished in Howe Sound this year. It was a bit of a push, but Thimbleberry Contracting finished what I think of as the remaining major infrastructure projects at our sites. Going forward, the work that remains ahead, maintenance and incremental building of capacity with tent platforms, is well within the capabilities of our club volunteers. And, on a final note, for proper composting, our 4 new composting toilets require the addition of wood shavings each time they are used. When you poop, you scoop. So, I will be recruiting experienced, house-sound capable club members for occasional supply runs. If that's you, I'll be coming for you. The end.